Hi, Mystery Writers. Welcome to Mystery Writers Studio, and I am so happy to be back after my open heart surgery and some time for recovery. So, welcome back. And today I thought we'd do some really basics, and that is some common mistakes that beginning writers make that are actually pretty easy to fix. And if you just know what they are, you won't fall into those traps because writing your first novel is a big project, and I think when you start you don't realize what a big project it is till you get it all together and take your story idea and try to work with it to get to a finished manuscript. And there's so many things to learn in between. And you have background research and character development and scene and chapter sequence and beats and story structure. And there's just a lot to your writing. And so, in spite of all that planning and preparation, story writing is actually a new process. And in the midst of the process, it's easy to derail your story because you're just carrying all this stuff with you. Um, so, one of the first things that I have noticed, and I know other people have noticed, is that there are too many characters in your story. Um, you want to keep it lean and mean, and your story needs to hit your reader in the clearest possible way. Um, so, movie extra characters can feel like you're adding color to your story, but in a way, especially in a mystery, your focus needs to be on your sleuth and the suspects. So, there's some things you can do um, to check your cast of characters by asking several simple questions. Does the character contribute to the storyline, and how? Just having them in a scene is not necessarily contributing to the storyline, all right? Um, does the character contribute to the protagonist's development? How, if in any way, does that character impact your protagonist, the sleuth? Uh, and then the big question is, will my plot, my story suffer if I just take this character out? And if it doesn't, you probably don't need that character. Um, I don't mean kill them in the line. I mean take them out of the story. Just don't even bring them into the story. That's it. So keep your story, uh, keep your story clean. And then there's what I call the flawful protagonist, and this is from taking all that story advice about how your main protagonist needs flaws and to make them more believable. And it's true, shortcomings make them feel rounded out and three dimensional. Um, and your sleuth actually has positive attributes that make them the best person to solve your mystery. And along the way, you gain empathy for your readers by giving them some weaknesses, but not too many. Refrain from making your hero one long sob story. That's your hero or your heroine. Cancer is okay. Overcoming an addiction is okay. A brutal childhood is okay. But all of them in one character alienate your reader with an unrealistic protagonist. There's just way too much for your protagonist to be dealing with on a personal level that has nothing to do with the storyline or solving the mystery. So be careful that you don't give your character too many big flaws, too many weaknesses. You want to make them real. And it's easy to make them relatable with smaller weaknesses, not great big huge things they have to fight with. All right. So give them one, possibly two big weaknesses, and just let the rest of it go and concentrate on moving your story forward with your protagonist that you have. And at the opposite end of that, and this is true for a lot of beginning writers, is the perfect protagonist. Uh, and you want your hero or heroine to be good at solving crime. Um, and so you pour on the talents. They can do this, they can do that. But on the other hand, a character without any flaws is just as unbelievable as the one with too many. So you want to strike that balance. So your sleuth runs marathons, has deductive powers, charms the ladies, and runs a self-help group. It's a lot to be going on that is essentially outside of your story. It's part of your sleuth life, but outside of the story. And you may feel as though you've created a well rounded character by giving her diverse talents, but she is just too perfect. So you can pull back on a couple of those talents and balance your sleuth journey with the talents and the weaknesses that you do have that we mentioned just a moment ago. And here's something, especially with narrative writing. I don't see this so much in script writing, but in fiction narrative, and that is what I call word genius writing. All right, you want to use clear, simple language. Keep your your reader reading. And Angela, hi, thanks for being here. And you may want to fancy up your prose by using a thesaurus for alternative word choices. Don't do it. All right? You don't need to sound smart. Readers don't care how smart you are. They just care about the story. So focus on telling this story, and definitely don't want to send your readers to a dictionary or an encyclopedia or a thesaurus in order to understand what you say. They want a good story, not a vocabulary lesson. So just tell your story straight. And the other thing is, if you're using a thesaurus to change out words, you may use the word incorrectly, and somebody who knows that word may wonder what the heck you're doing, all right? So if your writing is complicated, your readers can't follow the story. So this is something that beginning writers often do. They go for the big words to show how smart they are and impress their readers. And you really, really don't need to do that. Your job is to tell a good story. And then another one that beginning writer mistake is descriptive dialogue tags. And once again, just focus on said. He said, she said. Because readers just kind of skip those saids in their brain and keep going on with the dialogue. And school teachers and essay professors may have encouraged you to vary your wording, all right? But dialogue tags need to be unobtrusive. They need to be very quiet so your reader doesn't really notice them. So use character actions and the words they say to convey those emotions. So words like exclaimed, interjected, cried have no place in your dialogue. You want the dialogue to read smoothly as though the characters are speaking to each other. And you want your reader to feel like those characters are speaking to each other. And so those dialogue tags are just to make sure that your reader understands who's speaking now. If you're in a long dialogue passage, um, just remember that readers skip said in their head as they keep reading. So keep those dialogues tags simple and keep your reader in the story. And then one more thing that beginning writers do, um, which is very noticeable, is long opening narrative. You've got this great backstory that you've created about your protagonist, right? And you've built a world for your story, and you want to tell your reader everything at the beginning so they know all this stuff before they get to the story. I'm going to say it once, I'm going to say it a million times, is that go into the story first. Bring up all that other stuff later. You don't need to do this great big huge information dump at the beginning of your story. So scatter that pieces of information throughout your story without trying to tell everything at the beginning, because if you try to tell everything at the beginning, your reader's going to get bored and they're not going to go on to get to your story, because your story hasn't started yet. You're doing this giant information dump instead. All right. Your reader will care about the backstory until they actually care about your protagonist and the story world that you're creating in the now. So you want to bring them into your story first and start with a small problem for your protagonist to solve. That's a great way to begin your story. And leave all that backstory and giant narrative description, leave it for later on in your story. All right, so give your reader the opportunity to explore as your story builds. Okay, so that's 5 beginning writer mistakes, and just keep those in mind as you're writing your story. And it's a good thing for all writers to keep those things in mind as they're writing their story. But there's especially things that show up for beginning writers that they have to go back and fix before they can get their story published. So if you do it yourself and you're aware of those problems and you avoid them in your story, you're going to be way ahead of the game. All right, it's really wonderful to be back, and I want to thank you all for being here. And I will see you next week as we go into a Mystery Writer's Studio. Thanks for being here.